The planning began immediately. Every variable had to be controlled: weather, terrain, light angles, elevation changes. The shot would be nearly impossible, but that had never stopped her before. The only unknown was why she hesitated when she saw the name of the target scribbled in the margin of a document. Her fingers hovered over it, her face still neutral, but her breath caught just slightly for half a second. It was too quick for anyone else to notice, but the commander saw it and made a silent note. Later that night, she sat alone with her Barrett disassembled and laid out in perfect order. She worked in silence, her hands repeating a ritual of focus and control, but her thoughts were louder than gunfire. She knew that name from long ago, not just from briefings or dossiers, but from memory one. She had tried to bury under missions and numbers and steel. Her hand trembled just once as she reattached the scope, and then all was still again. The mission would be in 72 hours, and already the base was shifting into gear. Drones were being prepped, satellite feeds analyzed, communication encrypted. The commander met with his team, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the sniper, whose silence was more powerful than most men's. Screams. He knew she carried secrets, but he also knew that secrets could become weapons when they surfaced at the wrong time. She joined the recon team at the edge of the ridge 2 days later, lying flat on her stomach with the Barrett resting on a bipod. Her eye pressed against the scope, calculating, adjusting, recalculating again. The distance was brutal, the wind unpredictable, and the target appeared only once every 12 hours for exactly 46 seconds. She had one shot and she would be alone when the moment came. What the commander did not know was that years ago the man they now hunted had once served beside her, not as an ally but as something else entirely. Their missions had crossed during a war that was never declared, and he had left behind scars, both seen and unseen. For her, this kill was not just tactical. It was personal, and that made it dangerous. Night fell and she remained on the ridge alone, her body still as stone but her mind racing. Memories she had locked. Away came, clawing back to the surface sounds, faces, gunfire, screams. She tried to push them away, but the silence only made them louder. She thought of the kill at 3247 meters, and how that too had not just been about skill, but about redemption. In the final hours before the shot, everything became clear. The path of the bullet, the pulse of the wind, the curve of the earth. Her breathing slowed to a whisper, and her focus sharpened like the edge of a blade. The countdown began in her mind, but something deep within her shifted. A thought, a doubt, a memory threatening to fracture her focus at the last possible second. She adjusted her aim, her finger on the trigger, and waited for the moment to come. The wind stilled just slightly, and the world went quiet, not just around her but inside her, and then through the scope, she saw something she never expected. The man was not alone. Through the lens of her scope, she could see him walking out into the open, his movements unchanged from the earlier reconnaissance, slow, deliberate, and without urgency, but this time he was not alone. And that changed everything, because standing beside him was a young boy, no older than 10, with sharp eyes and a nervous stride, and for the first time in years. Her finger froze just above the trigger. She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her mask. Her body still pressed to the cold ground as the wind moved again, this time in gusts that felt too sudden, too forceful, as if nature itself was warning her not to take the shot, and she adjusted the scope just slightly, not to change the aim, but to be sure of what she was seeing, because mistakes could not be made at this distance, and there were no second chances. The boy walked close, to the target, his steps uncertain and his face partially hidden beneath the hood of a weathered coat. But there was something familiar in the way he moved, something that pulled at a thread she had long buried, and the longer she stared, the more that thread unraveled, and the more her memory surged with images she did not want to remember. Years ago, in a different country under different skies, she had been tasked with escorting civilians from a village under siege, and among those civilians had been a woman and her son, the boy, no older than 4 at the time, with the same nervous steps and the same wide eyes, and she remembered giving him a piece of chocolate from her ration pack, and how he had smiled at her as if the world around them was not crumbling into ash. That boy had a name she had tried to forget, but now that name rang like a bell behind her ears because the man walking beside him now had once been the commander of the enemy unit that had ambushed the village only days later, and the woman had died in the crossfire and the boy had vanished. She pulled back from the scope for just a moment, just enough to feel her heart beating like thunder in her chest, and for the first time in years she was uncertain because the target was not just a man anymore. He was a monster hiding behind the illusion of a guardian, and the presence of the boy changed nothing. And yet it changed everything, because it told her he had not just survived the war. He had claimed the boy as part of his cover, and maybe worse. Behind her in the comms channel, the SEAL commander's voice broke through soft and steady, asking for confirmation that she had visual and could take the shot, and she pressed her finger tighter against the trigger but did not reply because her mind was no longer thinking in meters and angles, but in moments and consequences. The seconds were ticking down the window for the shot was closing, and she knew that if she waited even a moment longer, the target would disappear back behind reinforced walls, and another chance might never come. But as she looked through the scope again, the boy turned, and for the briefest second, his face was fully visible and her breath caught in her throat because it was him. She could see it in his eyes, the way he glanced up at the man beside him with the same haunted look she had once seen in the mirror. And she realized the boy was not just walking with the target, he was being held there, not by choice, but by necessity and perhaps even fear, and that changed her mission. From assassination to rescue, she whispered into the radio, "Tell command, the shot is not clean. Do not fire, repeat, do not fire." And she waited for the response, knowing full well what the consequences might be for disobeying a direct order. But none came, only silence and static, as if fate was giving her one chance to choose without interference. She rolled away from her position and began packing her gear quickly, quietly, her hands moving faster than her thoughts, because she had made her decision, and it no longer involved pulling the trigger from 2 miles away, but walking straight into the storm and dragging the boy out of it with her bare hands if she had to. The extraction team was still on standby, but she did not wait for permission. She moved through the underbrush like a shadow, her Barrett strapped across her back and her sidearm drawn every step, a prayer every breath, a silent vow that she would not lose this one. She would not let another child vanish into the darkness. The compound was surrounded by surveillance drones and motion sensors, but she had studied their patterns and knew the gaps, knew when the cameras blinked and the lasers dipped, just low enough for someone to slip through, and she moved like water through cracks in a wall, unseen, unheard, unstoppable. Inside the walls of the compound, she found corridors of concrete and steel lit by dim red lights that cast long shadows, and each room she passed whispered of secrets and screams. But she did not stop. She kept moving, her eyes scanning her mind, calculating her soul burning. She found them in a room that looked more like a prison than a home. The boy sitting on a cot, his eyes wide as he turned toward her, and behind him the man, the monster, already reaching for the pistol on the table, but he was too slow because she moved like lightning, and her weapon was already raised before he could blink. Their eyes met, and in his expression she saw recognition and fear. Not fear of death, but of truth. The truth that she had survived the war and come back for what he stole from the ashes. And with one motion, she fired a single round, not at the boy, not at the monster, but at the light above them, plunging the room into shadow. The shot echoed like thunder, and in the moment of confusion she crossed the space between them, grabbed the boy by the arm, and pulled him behind her, his small frame trembling as they moved through. The dark hallway alarms beginning to wail behind them, and voices shouting orders in a language she had not heard in years. She did not stop even as bullets slammed into the walls beside her, even as smoke began to fill the corridor and fire flickered. In the distance she ran with the boy clutched to her side. Her breath ragged, her vision sharp, until at last they reached the outer perimeter, and the extraction team was already waiting with a chopper blades spinning and lights cutting through the night. The commander stood at the edge, his expression unreadable as she approached with the boy, and without a word, he reached out and helped pull them aboard, and the moment their boots hit the metal floor, the chopper lifted into the sky. The boy sat silently beside her, wrapped in a thermal blanket, his eyes still wide with shock and wonder and fear, and she sat beside him, her rifle across her knees, and her hands still trembling from everything she had not fired. The SEAL commander looked at her and nodded, not a gesture of approval or command, but of understanding, because now he knew what the shot at 3247 meters had truly meant. It was never about distance. She was just cleaning her Barrett 50 in the quiet hours before dawn. The dim light from a single bulb barely cut through the shadows of the cramped room. The air was thick with the smell of gun oil and metal cold and sharp. She moved slowly, deliberate. With every gesture, her hands steady as she wiped the barrel and checked the mechanism. Her mind was calm, but her heart beat with a steady rhythm like the ticking of a clock. Time stretched out in this small sanctuary of silence, where the outside world seemed distant and unreachable. Outside the walls of this room, the night was restless. The wind whispered secrets through the trees, and the faint hum of distant engines reminded her of the danger lurking just beyond. The battlefield was miles away, but the echoes of war were never far. Her fingers traced the cold steel with familiarity, born from years of practice and hard lessons. The Barrett was more than a weapon. It was an extension of herself, a lifeline in a world that demanded precision and patience. She had learned early that every detail mattered, from the angle of the barrel to the smallest speck of dust that could ruin a shot. The rifle had been cleaned and cared for countless times, each ritual bringing a measure of control to the chaos she often faced. The silence around her was deceptive, for beneath it lay a tension that could snap at any moment, like a coiled spring waiting for release. She prepared herself for the unknown. There was no one else in the room, just her and the heavy rifle. But she was not alone in the world. A shadow moved silently outside the window, unseen but present, watching and waiting. The SEAL commander had heard the stories whispered in briefings, the impossible distance, the shot that no one thought could be made. The kill at 3247 meters was a legend, but to him it was no fairy tale. It was a fact that needed to be understood and confronted. The SEAL commander had been through countless missions, seen the best and the worst, but something about this sniper intrigued him. Her calm in the face of deadly skill was unsettling. She cleaned her weapon like a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation, unaware that she was already the center of a storm gathering on the horizon. The night deepened, and the room grew colder, but she did not flinch. The rifle was her anchor in the sea of uncertainty, and as she finished cleaning, she carefully reassembled the weapon, locking it in place with a satisfying click. Her eyes flickered to the small window where the first hint of dawn was beginning to bleed into the sky. She did not know that beyond the shadows the commander was taking his first step toward unraveling the mystery that surrounded her. The silence held a secret, and the secret was about to break free with consequences that neither of them could yet imagine. Her world was about to collide with his, and the calm before the storm would be shattered forever. The rifle rested heavy in her hands, a promise and a warning, and the distance of the kill was a line that once crossed could never be undone. And in that moment, as the last drop of oil was wiped from the barrel, a single thought crossed her mind. What if the shot was not just about distance, but about fate itself? The SEAL commander had heard the whispers long before he met her. Stories passed quietly between those who lived in the shadows of war. A sniper who could make a kill at 32-47 meters was more myth than man. Yet the intelligence reports were clear, impossible shots were being made, and every time the distance pushed boundaries that should not be crossed, the commander knew these were not ordinary rumors, but pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve. He sat alone in the dimly lit briefing room, the glow of a computer screen illuminating his tired face. Every mission he had led required trust, discipline, and courage. But this was different. The sniper was not on any roster or mission list. Her existence was a secret buried deep beneath layers of classified information. He had orders to find her and understand the power behind the shot, but no one could tell him why or what would come next. The silence in the room was broken only by the steady hum of the air conditioning and the faint rustle of papers. The commander replayed the briefing one more time in his mind. The kill was recorded by multiple sources, confirmed by radar and spotters. Yet the conditions were almost perfect. Wind speed, air pressure, even the curvature of the Earth had to be calculated precisely to achieve such a feat. The sniper had done all of this with no margin for error. He thought about the sniper cleaning her Barrett 50 so carefully, the ritual so intimate, as if the weapon were alive and breathing. In her hands, the way she had moved with quiet confidence suggested she knew the value of every breath, every second, every inch of that rifle. Her calm was unsettling to him, for it meant she had mastered not only the weapon but herself. The commander rose and walked to the window, looking out at the dark horizon where dawn had yet to break. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? What motivated her to take such a shot from so far away? Was it duty, revenge, or something more personal? The commander felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. The answers lay hidden in the shadows where danger thrived and trust was scarce. He contacted his most trusted operative to arrange a meeting. Something about this sniper could not be ignored. She was a ghost on the battlefield, but a force that could change the tide of war. The commander needed to see her for himself to assess if she was an asset or a liability. Days later, in a remote safe house hidden deep within a forest, the commander finally met her. The room was sparse, lit only by a single lamp casting long shadows across the walls. She sat quietly at a table, cleaning the Barrett 50 again with the same meticulous care. The commander watched from the doorway, uncertain if he was walking into an ally or a trap. Her eyes lifted briefly, acknowledging him, but her face remained unreadable. Like a statue carved from stone, she showed no emotion. The commander stepped inside and cleared his throat. Breaking the silence, he spoke softly, but with authority, "Who are you, and how did you make that shot?" The sniper did not answer immediately. Instead, she continued her work as if his questions were not important. The tension in the room was palpable. The commander studied her hands the way. They moved steady and practiced. But behind the calm surface, he sensed a storm brewing. A story buried deep in her past that had forged her into this lethal figure. Finally, she looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time in full. The voice was low, steady and edged with something that hinted at pain and determination. "I did what had to be done." The distance was not a measure of skill alone, but of necessity. The commander nodded slowly, sensing there was more to uncover, but also knowing this was just the beginning. Outside the walls of the safe house, the world kept turning. Warplanes roared overhead, distant explosions echoed like ghosts from battles fought long before. This sniper was no longer just a rumor. She was a pivotal piece in a game where every move counted and every secret could be deadly. The commander knew he had to protect her because enemies would come looking for the truth behind that impossible kill. And in protecting her, he was also protecting the fragile balance of power that could tip with one wrong move. As the meeting ended, the sniper stood and slung the Barrett over her shoulder. The weight was familiar, comforting and deadly. The commander watched her leave into the dark night, feeling the heavy weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The story was no longer just about a kill at 3247 meters. It was about the woman behind the rifle and the shadows that followed her. Every step forward was a step deeper into a world where trust was scarce, and the next shot could be the last. And as she disappeared into the darkness, the commander was left with one haunting thought. How far was he willing to go to uncover the truth, and what price would they both pay when the secrets came to light? The boa sun had barely risen over the tree line when she returned to the base, her boots coated in dust and her expression unreadable. No one asked where she had gone, and no one dared to follow the Barrett. 50 rested against her shoulder, silent and heavy, like a promise made long ago. Her movements were slow measured, every step echoing a past she never spoke about. She did not belong here, not entirely, and yet the walls seemed to hold their breath when she passed, as if they too sensed the weight she carried. The SEAL commander watched her from a distance, noting the rigid posture, the way her eyes scanned the horizon, not out of fear, but calculation. She was always calculating distances, wind shifts, the speed of light, and death itself. There was something in her gaze, something that told him she had once looked through a scope and seen not just a target, but something far more personal. He stepped forward, and this time she did not ignore him. She turned slightly, her expression still, blank, but her silence was a signal that she was willing to listen. He gestured toward the command tent, and she followed wordlessly. Inside, maps were spread across a metal table, photos of buildings, vehicles, and heat signatures. The mission ahead was critical, and the commander knew he needed her not just for the kill, but for what she had already proven herself capable of doing. As they stood over the maps, the commander spoke in a low voice. "There is a man in the mountains, high-ranking ex-military, trained in counter-surveillance and surrounded by layers of defense. We have one chance to take him out, but it will require a shot longer than anything recorded since your last." The room fell into silence, her eyes not leaving the photo of the target. A moment passed, and then she nodded slowly, one single motion that spoke louder than words.